as a little kid, he was just playing with his brother and hit an IED, and his brother pushed him in a wheelbarrow up to our patrol base, and our corpsman that was there tried to save him but couldn't, and it's just like my thinking at that point was, well, man, if we weren't here fighting on their turf, would that IED be there? Would that kid still be alive? And those are kind of the things that I had to like try and rationalize myself. Like, they don't want us here because we are here. There's IEDs that kids are stepping on, farmers are stepping on. Innocent women and children are getting blown up because of our presence.
You're listening to the Art and War podcast with your hosts, Mitch and Nathan. Mitch is a former airborne infantry squad leader who now spends most of his time coaching soccer. Nathan is a professional illustrator and an avid shooter with a couple of years of Canadian military experience. Together, they run the Seaburn Art page. Enjoy the show.
All right. I had something planned in my head to do an intro and I forgot. See, this is one of the benefits of being a super professional, awesome podcast. Today we got Jed Morgan, doer of Stuff and Things, Guardian Project, and the White Heart Foundation. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. We tried to do this before a couple times. How many times did we try and record? Like 3 or 4 times?
Yeah, it's probably about 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah. You were traveling. What were you doing while you were traveling?
At that point, took my family and our trailer and drove up from Colorado Springs out to Nebraska. My wife used to work at a camp there, and so we wanted to visit some old friends of hers there, and then out to Kansas to see her grandparents. So we were just kind of on the road, and not the best of Wi-Fi or cell signals where we were at. So it was just kind of hit or miss there.
It makes me laugh because you were in Colorado Springs, and I only back in May. No, what's the month of May? April? Back in April is when I moved from Colorado Springs. So if I just waited a little bit, we could have done it in person and kind of avoided some of those issues. But it's okay.
No, it's all right. Yeah.
Yeah, traveling went well though. Everything good with family.
Yeah, it went all right. As good as it can go with 3 little ones, I suppose. Going from Oregon to Colorado, and then Nebraska, Kansas, all those little spots too. But yeah, we made it home safely, and everyone's doing well, so
Awesome.
Can't complain.
Hell yeah. Well, let's just dive right into it. You were in the Marine Corps. What made you want to join the Marine Corps?
So yeah, initially, growing up, as a young boy, I had always had a dream to join some sort of service capacity, whether it be police, firefighter, military, that sort of thing. And yeah, during high school, we'd have the recruiters from the various branches come out to my high school and put their table up and kind of show what they do and talk to us a little bit. And I just always was gravitated towards the Marine Corps, probably their uniforms and all that good stuff. But I just talked to the recruiters there and got more and more interested in it. But really it wasn't until, a year after graduating, I was working at an apartment complex in Colorado Springs. And I was just like, man, I want to do something bigger with my life than just do some sort of menial job. I want to push myself. I want to prove myself in a way, and I still want to serve other people and protect people and all that. And so I decided to go into the military.
And what was your job in the Marine Corps?
I was a 0311 infantry rifleman.
Mm-hmm. And the way that the Marine Corps works, you don't get to pick your job, correct? Like towards the end of boot camp is kind of you get assigned depending on how you did or what the Marine Corps needs.
You can request it, through your recruiter beforehand. I was actually first going to try and become a MP and
Ew.
I was just had months I had to wait before I could even go into boot camp. And my recruiter called me up one day and was like, "Hey, there's an opening for infantry if you're interested, and you can leave in like a week." I was like, "Yeah, of course." So I uh, I did that route.
Why did you want to be an MP?
Not really. I guess kind of that idea of, okay, I can be police and military at the same time. I don't know. Wasn't
Sorry.
really sure what that all entailed, but I'm glad I didn't go that route.
I'm
Now
glad you
knowing what
didn't
it
go
will
that
be
route
like.
either. Yeah, I think that's a common theme with people who join the military. Like they have this idea in their head of like what their job's going to be. Like I joined, I
Hmm.
was going to be a airborne infantryman, and I'm like, all right, kicking indoors, modern warfare 2 times, going to be going door to door, saving people, shooting terrorists. Like that's my job.
Yeah.
Um, and I know people who similarly, they're like, all right, I'm going to be cybersecurity or I'm going to be intelligence, which means I'm gathering intel for people. I'm building all these intelligence reports on high value targets. And then they get there and they get thrown into like the S shops.
Yeah.
I think that's just, it's funny because I was talking with some of my buddies who are still in the recruiters. I was asking them, I'm like, why are retention numbers like so low right now, and like what's going on like in the recruiting world trying to address that? And a lot of their responses were like the restrictions on what they tell us we can tell recruits, and also like commanders of the recruiting posts are like not encouraging them to lie. I mean, we all know like recruiters kind of lie to get you and boost the numbers, but it's
Hmm.
like purposely withholding what actual life in the military is like, and building on that hype of like, what people think your job is in the military. um
Right. Yeah.
it's a weird thing to me. Did your recruiter have to lie to you at all? Like what was your recruiting experience like, or were you just, because I remember with me, I my recruiter didn't have to sell me on anything. I was fully committed. I'm like, you don't have to sell me on anything, dude. You don't have to go out, you don't have to take me to lunch. Like this is what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. I guess kind of similar for me. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and I mean, I didn't want to go and sit in an S shop. I knew that I didn't want to do like supply or something. But as long as I could do something, the infantry, police, that whatever, I was pretty much good to go. So I just basically told them this is what I want to do, and just kind of went from there. And it wasn't too difficult of a process for me.
Why did you choose Marine Corps over like Army, Air Force? What drew you specifically to the Corps?
Um, yeah, interesting enough, I actually did the ASVAB through the Army. So at first, I was kind of set up to go through the Army, got the ASVAB score and everything through them, and was kind of set up to get put into their whole system, and kind of had that waiting period while they were going to put me in their system and whatnot. And I started thinking about it more, and I was like, yeah, I could go Army, and um, it'd be pretty cool, but I always hear about how much more difficult like Marine Corps boot camp is, and they always have this, um, this way about them that they're, I guess, more like the front lines. They go in first.
Tip of the
Their
spear.
trainings, yeah, tip of the spear kind of thing. And so I was like, that sounds more appealing to me. I want to push myself as much as I can, at least in the beginning portion here, and then um, so that's what I kind of decided to go in the Marine Corps because of that.
You mentioned boot camp being harder, and I remember that was one of the things that I was weirdly excited about in the Army. I'm like, man, like basic training is going to be hard, and it's going to push me to my limits. And I'll be honest, it was one of the more disappointing things in my career. Like it was hard. I'm not saying like, oh, I was a badass. It was super easy. It was just hard in different ways. Like I remember
Yeah, yeah,
thinking like, oh, I'm not doing push-ups and running like literally 24 hours, 7 days a week. Like don't get me wrong, did a lot of push-ups,
yeah,
did a lot of running. But I remember it not being as physically challenging as I thought. And I was kind of disappointed. Is a was a Marine Corps boot camp kind of similar for you, or what was that like?
Yeah, I'd say similar for me. I mean, the more challenging part was just the mental, emotional
Yeah,
uh, difficulty. I mean, growing up, I mean, I was homeschooled for half of my childhood, and then, um, just kind of lived at home around my parents and friends and all that. And then all of a sudden, bam, you're gone. You don't have access to any of them. And so that was kind of a harder part for me, was the mental and emotional aspect. And physically, it was difficult, sure, but it definitely, you go from that to infantry school, and then from infantry school to your unit, and you're like, oh man, like boot
yeah,
camp was the easiest physically.
yep, yeah. That was my experience as well. Once I got to my unit, it was like, oh, like this baseline that I have that I thought was really good is not really good in comparison to everybody
No.
else. Um, and that's when the real fuck game started. Like basic training, like you're drilling. Marine Corps is drill instructors, and we have drill sergeants. But
Hmm.
same. They make it challenging because one, you're isolated. That emotional toll, especially how old were you when you joined?
Would have been 19.
You were 19. Okay, so you were
Hmm.
still young. You were young like me. I was 17, and you went from, especially because we kind of grew up similarly, where like phones and internet kind of just started to become a thing. So we just started like psychologically getting used to having access to everybody like in our hands at
Hmm.
all times. And then that was taken away. And then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, like I have to write letters. And then like mail time, I remember being like the most like exciting thing.
Oh yeah.
I think it was like every Sunday for us, but for like the first like not 12 weeks, the first like 4 weeks, um, we didn't get any mail. And it was
Hmm.
always so disappointing. It's like, all right, mail time. And like one person would have a letter. And I'm like, fuck. Like, I want to talk to somebody.
Right.
Yeah, I want to hear from someone. And the letters were never long enough because I'd just sit there, like, even, sometimes there'd be like 3 or 4 page letters. And I'm like, fuck, I wish this was like 12 pages. I always wanted that more. Because that isolation and not knowing what's going on in the world was probably the most challenging bit. And
For sure.
I have a buddy who's a drill sergeant now, and I asked him about this. Were you kind of not lied to, but exaggerate? Like, think world events were exaggerated by your drill sergeants or drill instructors for you? Because mine, they'd be like, "Oh fuck, we're going to war, boys! Like this, you better take this shit seriously because you're likely going to deploy." And I mean, some of us did, some of us didn't. But when I joined, it was like 2013, 2014. So like the initial invasion kind of died down, and we already kind of knew it was kind of occupying Afghanistan, kind of. Um, how was that for you? Did they like exaggerate some things for you, or were they just nonchalant? How are your drill instructors?
Oh yeah, they definitely exaggerated it. Because I went in at 2009, and we had guys that had gone in, drill instructors that had gone in at the initial invasion and everything. And, they're the ones that are training us. And, the things that they had to see on that initial invasion kind of shaped how they trained us. So they, constantly like, there's people dying in your uniform, and here you are like, acting like a pathetic,
Yeah, yeah,
pathetic worm,
being a piece of
and
shit. Yeah, yeah. I asked my buddy. He's a drill sergeant now, and I asked him. I'm like, "Are you?" Because there's no like communication. But like for some of the soldiers in basic training, like that are under you that joined right when like Ukraine was kicking off, are you telling them like that we're over there doing shit now? And he's like, "Oh, absolutely. I'm saying that we are likely
yeah,
to deploy. We're on standby to deploy to Russia, and they need to take this seriously." And I'm like, "Well," I laughed. It was a phone call with him. I'm like, "But we're not."
yeah,
He's like, "Yeah, but it helps them take it seriously, and it really puts them into perspective." Um, because eventually they might. maybe not Ukraine, but another war somewhere, or maybe Ukraine. I don't know. Maybe we're going to war with Russia. I hope not,
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully
but
not. Yeah.
yeah, hopefully not. But I do remember them exaggerating a lot of things, and I look back now. I retired a staff sergeant, and I look back now as like when I'm not an NCO, I'm a retired guy, but I look back with the mindset of being a staff sergeant, and I'm like, why were I know they're not my peers, like my drill sergeants aren't my peers, they're probably first sergeants, or sergeant majors now, but I look back and in the mindset of a staff sergeant, I'm like, I don't know if I would lie to a bunch of people who have no access to like anything and tell them that they're going to war in like Ukraine, like I don't know if that's something that
Yeah.
I would do, but I was never a drill sergeant, so I don't really know, but it's just funny to think about.
Yeah.
Because basic training and all that, you're so, like you said, you're isolated emotionally, you're isolated from like the outside world in terms of news, you have no idea what the fuck is going on, and you don't really have time to think about it because you're always stimulated doing something, even if it's you know maybe you're not doing push-ups or running all the time, but like I remember like fucking like 12 hours we would just sit there and clean weapons. And
Oh yeah.
I'm like, my weapon is clean. But if I wasn't looking like I'm cleaning my weapon, then I'm gonna get fucked up. And I'm like, all right, well, hour 10 into cleaning my M4 that I shot like 40 rounds out of,
Yep.
it's
Yeah, they
just,
definitely keep you busy.
yeah. I think all of that it's intentional, and I also think some of it is just lazy drill instructors who are kind of tired of being there all day during the first kind of phase where they literally live with you and everything.
Hmm.
Um, but I didn't think about that at the time, because I didn't know how the army worked at the time.
Right.
I was disillusioned to how it all worked. I'm like, oh, these drill sergeants they're all fucking killers. They're all fucking badasses. They all, and I'm sure some of them did some of those things. But in hindsight, I'm like, man, I was a staff sergeant at one point. Like I know other staff sergeants. There's a lot of a lot of pieces of shit out there, and there's a lot of like fake. I don't want to say fake. There's a lot of people that exaggerate, and when they're in that position where like nobody knows better, I feel like that's just time for them to
Yeah.
kind of do that even more.
Oh yeah. I guarantee it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get assigned, you're an infantryman. Where were you stationed at?
I was in 29 Palms, California.
Oh,
The beautiful part of California. If you've never been,
I,
people always like talk about Malibu or something, and no, it's 29 Palms, man.
29 Palms.
Yeah.
I have some buddies that were stationed over in Japan. They either loved it or hated it. But I think that's kind of just your military experience in general. You either love it or hate it.
Mm.
So you show up as a private. What's kind of your initiation to the unit like?
Let's see. It was that was probably the hardest part, honestly, even mentally and emotionally. Than like boot camp or infantry school. We had guys that they just got back from a deployment to Iraq, and most of them were getting ready to leave the military, and so they were, just all these guys with chips on their shoulders. They didn't really see a whole lot combat wise and on their deployment, but still a few things here and there, a few IEDs and whatnot, and just having that mentality of, oh man, we're hardened combat vets, and we're about to get out, and here's these new guys. We got to mess them up a little bit, and so a lot of the you know hazing kind of stuff going on, and that was like my first initial reaction of just, I mean, you're outside picking up cigarette butts till 2 a.m. And having to count, and if you miss out on that count just by one, you're out there again, and just those kind of things. You're just like, wait, this is the Marine Corps, and like this is what my life's going to be like, is just picking up cigarette butts and just you know being being messed with every day. But yeah, I mean, finally after like first deployment and everything, which was just it was just a deployment on a ship, Marine Expeditionary Unit. But after that, people stopped kind of messing with us as much. But that was my initial reaction for sure. It was just that, all these little games that they wanted to play.
Oh, the fuck games. Yeah, I remember thinking similarly. I was like, I'm finally out of like training. Airborne school's done. All of this is done. I get to go to my unit, and I'm going to be treated like an adult because I'm not just an adult. I'm a fucking infantryman. Like I had that idea and that mindset, and I show up to my
Yep.
unit, and the first thing I'm just getting fucked up. Don't even know why.
Oh yeah.
And the fuck games are always fun. This episode is brought to you by Advanced Warfighting Solutions. Advanced Warfighting Solutions, they have quite literally everything that you need to be a lethal, super cool Instagram operator, and also just a super cool actual operator, or just a super cool civilian, or just whatever the fuck you want. They have battle belts, plate carriers, assault packs, pretty much anything nylon, they got it. So be sure to check them out. Use code ARTMORE10 on an SMU war belt, and you'll save some money. We don't get any kickback, you just save money. Huge thank you to them for supporting the show.
How's it going, lads and ladies? I'm BR, producer of the show, here to take a quick break to tell you about our Patreon. Not only do we want to continue improving the quality of what we can do here on Art and War, but we want to push what we do all over at Seaburn Art, from the guides to pursuing video content and the lofty goal of having a space for our team to make it all happen, and the Patreon helps us get after it. But what's in it for you? Our Patreon subscribers enjoy 5 different tiers of exclusive perks, ranging from all of the content the lads would post on a pre-Zuckerberg Instagram, downloadable high-resolution guides and targets including Redcoats, Skinwalkers, John Harvey Kellogg, World Economic Forum cult leaders, and more. Also, behind-the-scenes info like Nathan's personal art, spicy memes, and at our highest tier, get monthly art commissions created by Nathan himself. You can find our Patreon via the link in this episode's description at patreon.com/SeaburnArt or in the Seaburn Art page's bio on Instagram. Now let's get back to the show.
I was stationed on a base, Delden in Italy, and it was like 2.2 miles around. And I remember the barracks to the cough where I worked, it was like a mile away. So I showed up in uniform, and I thought I was fucking cool. I'm like, I'm going to be squared away as fuck. I went and I got everything sewn on. I even got my rank sewn. I didn't have rank yet. I didn't even have mosquito wings yet.
Yeah.
So I just got the little patch to cover up my rank, so I look squared away as shit. I got my airborne wings sewn on to my uniform. I'm like, I'm going to look squared away. I'm going to be as best as I could. I fucked up. Instead of airborne wings, I got a mustard stain, which is a combat jump. And I showed up as a fucking private. And this was in the old uniform. You remember the old like digital army uniforms? The ones that just look weird, didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So the yellow really stood out on that. And I walk into the cough all confident, thinking like, yeah, I'm squared away. Like I'm the squared away new guy around here. And I remember just getting fucked up for no reason. No reason at all. They made me go out and low crawl in my brand new uniform. And I'm like, oh, it's going to get all dirty. Like, this is my new uniform. And it wasn't until it must have been a couple hours where somebody was finally like, who the fuck do you think you are? Are you prior service or something? I'm like, no, I'm like 17 or 18. I don't remember. I think I might have turned 18 at that point. And I'm like, no, I'm like 18. And they're like, so why the fuck do you have a mustard stain? And I'm like, oh no. Like I look down and I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? And it was just I didn't live that down for a while. I don't blame them. But it is
Yeah.
funny, like you mentioned, your guys were getting back from deployment, and it's like they hate you because you weren't there, on top of already being a new guy.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, you were 19. You're like, I guess if I would have joined when I was fucking like 16, I could have been there with you guys, but like, I couldn't have done that.
Right.
But the culture is funny.
Yeah, it is.
Do you ever miss it?
Yeah, definitely. I think just the brotherhood that's, obviously not during all those little games they play, but after that, once you're kind of accepted into the fold, and you've made friends and a brotherhood with the people that are your peers, that's kind of the stuff that I miss.
Yeah, those especially after you start to go through some training events that really suck. I think that's kind of what's that saying? Where it's like adversity creates camaraderie. Camaraderie.
Mhm.
Um, those hard times together really forge that bond. Do you keep in touch with some people that you were in with?
Yeah, I try to. It's definitely hard maintaining that, but yeah, I try to stay in touch as best I can. And I know everybody's off doing their own thing; they're busy, work, kids, family, that kind of thing. But yeah, I try to, and we try to get together at certain times as well. Anytime we've got like a wedding or something going on, we'll get an invite and try to all link up if we can.
Yeah, that's kind of the beautiful thing. I think everybody talks like, "Oh, you're going to make friends for life," and I think that's certainly true. But it's not the type of friends that it's not like the traditional friendship where like you're always hanging out because everybody's from all over different places. Some people are in California, some are in New York, some are in Texas, some are in Oregon. Like
Mhm.
it's not like you get out or you PCS or ETS and or whatever the Marine Corps calls it, and you just get to hang out with them all the time. Like everybody kind of goes their own direction. But the cool thing is, like if you ever see like that caller ID pop up and you're like, oh shit, like you can connect, like you guys have always, stayed in contact. And that is one of the nicer things about it, I think. I find myself romanticizing certain bits of the military now that I've been out for a couple months. I wouldn't say that I miss it, but I definitely look back at things that were like in the moment really shitty that I'm like, that was kind of cool, you know.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool. That was a good moment. It was
Oh yeah.
it was a shitty moment in the moment, but like I look back on it as like the most fun I never want to have again. Some
Yeah.
things, some things, not everything. Okay, so
Yeah.
you ended up, you know, you deployed. How many times did you deploy?
It ended up just being twice.
Twice. Where was your
Yeah.
first one?
The first one, yeah, was just a Marine Expeditionary Unit. So we went to Japan, hopped on a ship, and floated around. Did some, humanitarian kind of things, and we were going to be training the Filipino Marines on like boat landings, and um, but I think there's a typhoon like was hitting right around that time, so we couldn't train them for too long, but just did different things like that around Philippines and Singapore and different parts of Japan.
It's weird picturing Marines doing humanitarian work. Like I could see Army, Air Force, but when I think of Marines, and I know it's not true, but like kind of that mentality, I think of Marines and I'm like, oh, tip of the spear, cold hearted killers, crayon eaters. They just run around, they cause fucking mayhem, and then they go home. Like that's kind of like in my head what they do. But a Marine doing humanitarian work is so. What kind of humanitarian work were you doing?
I didn't personally have a hand in any of that part, but that typhoon or whatever, that big storm, it hit the Philippines, and we had you know our seventh Marine Division that's on this MEU. They had like one detachment go and provide aid to the Filipinos there, and I think they just handed out some food and water and those sorts of things. Put some sandbags, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, we just kind of floated out and waited out in the ocean for a little bit until things calmed down with that storm. And
Hmm. Yeah, like I said, it's just weird thinking. It's weird picturing Marines doing that.
yeah,
I mean, I'm sure they do. But the other thing about the Marine Corps, and probably why I think that perception is the way that it is in comparison to the other branches, the Marine Corps is very small. Maybe not Coast Guard. Coast Guard's probably the smallest. Space Force now, too. I don't know
yeah,
how big
Space
they
Force,
are.
yeah,
But like Air Force and Army are very, very big on their own. And the Marine Corps is relatively small in terms of like manning.
hmm
I wonder why then, because it always seemed the Marines that I've worked with and that I've talked to, they've always had like the shittiest equipment. Even for us, like we had shitty equipment, I
Mm.
thought, and then like I talked to a Marine and they're like, "Oh no, like you don't know shitty. You don't know shitty
Yeah.
equipment." And I'm like, "But you guys are like smaller. You would think like the budget would like go to like more the less people, less personnel." And they're like, "No, our budget is also smaller." And I'm like, "Oh shit."
Mhm.
So like doing less with doing more with less was always something that I found Marines doing, and their ability to improvise fun. Um,
Yeah.
I was in Ukraine um, back in 2014, 2015, and some Marines were there, and we had a volleyball court. Like we had sand and like a volleyball net. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, we were all US soldiers. For whatever reason though, the Marines weren't allowed to use our stuff and like our areas, and we weren't allowed to use theirs. But they didn't have
Mm.
an area. So like we had literally like a volleyball court, and we had the Ukrainians built like a little soccer field, kind of like surrounded in a cage, and the Marines would literally just sit there watching us play volleyball until one day I saw them. They went and they emptied a ton of sandbags to make like a sand court, and
Yeah.
they made a net out of like trees and like a camo net, and they just went and it was just so fucking cool to see. And I'm like, wow, like we have like legit volleyball nets and courts and soccer fields and like PT equipment. They didn't have that, so they just went out, cut some fucking trees, stole some sandbags, and made their own like that. Well up to
Nice.
them. Yeah, cool guys. All right, so let's get into your second deployment. Where was that to?
That was in Sangin, Afghanistan, the Helmand province.
Okay. And what rank were you when you deployed there?
Let's see, it would have been a Lance Corporal E3.
E3. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, what's an E3 do? Kind of as a part of a infantry squad, are they similar to the army, where it's like just you're a rifleman or you're a saw gunner?
Yeah, yeah, rifleman. I was a saw gunner on that deployment, and you start getting, at that point, I was a more senior Lance Corporal, I guess you could call it, and had started getting responsibilities put on me, like being a team leader and those sorts of things.
And before we get into when you were blown up, um, had you been out on operations before that? And what were they kind of like for you?
Yeah, let's see. I mean, we before injury. I mean, we'd been there for about 3.5 months. So, yeah, I was just we had a patrol base that we first started out in, and it was just an old British outpost out in Sangin, and our job was to patrol the area. We had two different areas. So there's the one paved highway there, Highway 1, kind of splitting our AO, and we have what we called green side, which was all the farm fields, and it's green. And then we had the brown side, which is on the opposite side of the road. It was just the total opposite, scenery, brown, just all the city, basically, all the buildings and huts and compounds, and different roadways. And so we weren't allowed to drive any vehicles other than on that one paved road. And so if we were doing a patrol further down the road, we might be able to hop in some trucks and get a little ride down to a different spot. But typically it was just we'd walk right out of our patrol base, and my team, we patrolled on the brown zone, and that was kind of a big hotbed area. I mean, the whole place was, but definitely the brown zone was a big hotbed for IEDs. And so our job, initially was just kind of hearts and minds mission, trying to show the locals that we were there, we're willing to help out in any way, trying to gather information. And early on, it was just it was still the tail end of winter, or I guess spring there. Hadn't
Oh,
warmed up quite yet. The
yeah.
poppies hadn't blossomed yet, so they weren't their war money hadn't come in, and so it was pretty quiet. But as things kind of got warmer and warmer, and they started pulling in that money, and IEDs started popping up more and more, and um, pop shots started getting taken at us. But yeah, it's kind of our experience there. Just a lot of patrols, standing post.
What was it like the first time you were shot at? I've heard many different responses to this question. I have my own experience and thoughts, but for you as a Marine, what was it like? Even if it was just pop shots, what was it like that first time that you were shot at?
I think for me, just I mean, it had been, what was that, 2 3 years ish of prep, like training for war, um, before finally having this deployment. And never having been shot at in the first deployment, um, never been shot at obviously in training. And we go there, and excitement's all up. You're finally doing the deployment that you had kind of always pictured and dreamed of, that a Marine would do. And for us, yeah, we were just walking down an alleyway, and shots kind of went overhead. I don't think they could hit us from where we were at, but hearing that crack right over your head, and at first not even realizing what was going on. But some of the guys that had been on combat tours before instantly knew what it was, and telling us we're getting shot at. And your adrenaline starts pumping, and it's more like, at least for me, it was kind of like excitement, like, oh, like, really,
Like
like,
this
this
is
is
it.
it, like,
Yeah.
we're doing it.
Yeah. I remember for me, I didn't believe it. I had stepped out of a truck. This was our very first, my first like operation in combat environment. I stepped out of the truck to take a piss, and I left the door open, which is a no-no because if you get blown up, the blast waves then can go into the vehicle. But if you close the door, it's made to withstand a certain amount. And I got
Mhm.
yelled at while I'm taking a piss. And as I'm getting yelled at, I heard like a couple like snaps and then like a very, very like crack. And I'm like, what was that? Like I was kind of confused. Like I nonchalantly am getting out. I'm just pissing on the side of the road in this convoy. And the guy inside, it was one of the ODA guys. He goes, "We're getting fucking shot at, dude. What the fuck are you doing?" He yells at me to get back in the vehicle after just yelling at me for closing the door. And I'm like, "Oh, we're getting shot at?" Like I didn't understand. I'm just like, "Oh, well, what's that?" Like I forgot where I was. Um, I think like yourself, that's kind of the most common answer where it's like you're excited because it's finally all this anticipation. You're like, you join the Marine Corps and you're like, this is what I've wanted. Like this right here is what mentally I've been preparing for, physically I've been preparing for. I've been going through all this training. Um, yeah, and it's interesting how we kind of glorify that like war. Like
Yeah.
I think about that a lot now where I'm like, why was I so hungry to go and like get shot at and shoot people? Like why is that something I wanted? I'm curious for you. Why do you think you were excited about it? As a because I feel like a normal, I say normal. I'm putting that in air quotes. I feel like a normal response to getting shot at should be, and I'm not saying you weren't scared or I wasn't scared, but it's like I feel like a normal, healthy response is I should be fucking scared and I should leave. But for some reason, I remember kind of like yourself, I was like excited and kind of like in disbelief about it. Why do you think that was for you?
uh yeah, I mean, I think a large part of it plays into, I mean, you're in boot camp, you're in infantry school, you're in your unit. And I mean, just the whole narrative that you're given is, this is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to face. and this is your job. And then, you're hearing stories of, people that have, fought in the past, past wars, and the horrors that they had to undergo. And you're just like, dude, I can do that too. If they can, I can too. And, hearing the, at least for me, like, Marine Corps stories of Marines that had, World War II, that, they went towards the sound of the guns, they didn't cower down and hide. And, I mean, you're just kind of indoctrinated, I guess you could say, in this idea of your job is not to run from the sound of fire, it's to go towards it. And, I don't know. It's just kind of, I guess, especially that young of an age. I mean, you're not totally thinking rationally. That part of your brain hasn't even been developed yet. But you're just like, all right, well, this is what I do, I guess, and that's what they told me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very like in the moment, and while I was in, I didn't really think about it too much. But now, in hindsight, especially having these conversations with, folks like yourself, or just people that were kind of in and saw combat, I'm like, why is the overwhelming majority response the first time we get shot at like excitement? And it's just it's always interesting to me hearing those answers. So, will hearts and mind. That was kind of the mission for a long time. Hearts and minds, hearts and minds. Do you think you were successful in that? You and your squad, your team.
No, I don't. I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, we would. We had people that would tell us, not so much to our face, but our interpreters would overhear it or whatnot, and they'd come back and say, like, yeah, they don't want you here at all. Like, they wish that you would leave and the Taliban would come instead, because you're making their life a lot more difficult. And we'd give them certain things, materials to build walls or fences for their homes and things like that. And I mean, they would just completely trash it. And so it's just based on what I saw and heard. It didn't seem like we were very effective in what we were trying to accomplish there.
How does that make you feel when you want to join to help people, and you're there and you're hearing that, and you're seeing they don't want your help? Did that while you were deployed? Not necessarily now, but while you were deployed and you hear and you see that stuff, how did that affect you?
For me, I was just like, why are we even here?
Hmm.
And what's the point of being here if they don't even want us, if we're not actually helping anyone, or even arguably hindering them and their way of life? Um, like, what's the point of being here?
Hmm. I In the moment, when I would reflect on that while I was deployed, because if, similarly for us, I did get to work with some people who were very happy to work with us, but there was also a lot of people who just didn't want us there, and it was very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the
Yeah.
moment I rationalized it to myself. I'm like, well, if they don't want us here, they're the bad guy. Um, Now I'm a little bit older. I look at it in a very different light. I'm curious for you now, looking back, especially because now we know how Afghanistan kind of ended. At least our presence in Afghanistan ended. You see, you see how we left. You have the experience, firsthand experience, dealing with the people of Afghanistan. Um, how did that? How did that affect you? What were your thoughts when you saw how we left?
Definitely made me pretty upset. Uh, you have so many people that have fought and bled and died in for a cause that at least you're told is a cause. For a mission that you at least think that is there in your mind, and for people that you're just trying to defend ultimately, and then to go and see just the atrocities that happen when we're pulling out of there in such a way, makes me think about the people on my deployment, the little kids, beautiful little kids, and just the things that we, I guess, could have done, and the things that I at least hope that we had done while we were there. The people that we had hopefully kept safe at least for a time. I think of those, and it's like, well, I mean, they could be, you know, killed now because the Taliban, they keep track and record of who we helped and who helped us and that kind of thing, and it's just, yeah, it's hard to think about, and it's unfortunate in the way that we did it, but yeah, it's hard. I just kind of, I guess, think about, hopefully we at least saved some lives. We at least helped some people in the time that we were there. I'm not there now, so I can't help in any way right now currently. But that's just kind of my hope, is at least our footprint there helped in some small way.
Yeah. The kids thing really, really speaks to me. Because you see, did you had already had kids on your deployment, or
No, I
no?
hadn't had any kids at that point.
I I find, looking back, I'm very happy I didn't yet either. Because right now, when I have my daughter and I just think of those kids over there, I get really sad. And I was sad too at the time, but I don't think I really fully understood the life that the people and the children over there really have to experience. I saw glimpses, and it amazed me always how happy the kids always were. The kids were
Yeah.
always smiling, having a good time. Um, and I remember thinking, I'm like, what do they have to be really happy about? We would go through their village, and I'm like, they live in these literal mud huts. Some of them, we would patrol. Not, but no, we wouldn't even patrol. I was very fortunate in my deployment to have been attached to the people that we were. Um, they didn't patrol ever just to patrol. Everything was deliberate, but we deliberately moved through certain places, and some people there still live in caves in the mountains. Like, they don't have like
Mm.
even mud huts or anything. They live in caves
Yeah.
and holes,
Wow.
and still they were happy. And I think there's something pure about that. But
Hmm.
at the same time, that they've been exposed to terrible, awful things, and seeing what they didn't have and still being able to be happy. I look back, and I have to do some mental gymnastics to not get sad about it, where I'm like, I disconnect from that part of the world in a way. And I don't know if that's
Hmm.
morally right or not, but now when I think about it, it's like, that was a different time. Like, that's not how it is, like, I have to convince myself, like, that isn't the reality that is still existing over there, but it very much is. You know, Either they're dead or they're still in that cave in the mountain.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's really sad. It's sad to think about, because, like yourself, I wanted to help people. And I think a lot of people join with the intention of wanting to help people and to do good. And the reality is that, like yourself, you get there and you just see, you're hoping you help, but you also see that help isn't as black and white as it's made out to be. Um,
Definitely.
you can give whatever. You can give. I remember we would give money. I thought it was funny. The ODA guys, the RTO, the Echo, I think, is what they go by.
Mm.
If one of, like, somebody's like house got destroyed or a fence got destroyed or crops got destroyed, they had a black garbage bag full of like American dollars, and they would just like hand them like shit. And I'm like that is
Wow.
the most money I've ever seen in my life. But like
Yeah.
they didn't care about it. Like they didn't want the money. They're like, we don't want you
Mhm.
here. Like we don't like I'm sure they were happy to be maybe compensated, but like ultimately I remember they would just still just get fucking angry. They're like, why are you even here? Why are you driving through our fields? Why are you driving through our fences? Why are you fighting people in our village? And it got
Mhm.
to the point where it was really eerie to me when we entered one village. All of the locals knew there was going to be a fight and they all left. Like
Mhm.
when we were entering, the entire village caravanned out of there.
Yeah. Red flag. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I'm like, why are they? I looked over to our terp and I'm like, why are they leaving? And he's like, because they know there's about to be like a fight in here. And I'm like, this is the weirdest thing for me. They're just,
Yeah.
they're like side by side. We're going in, they're going out.
Hmm.
And looking at their faces, like looking at kids, like that's when they weren't happy. They just look sad looking up at us. And I'm like, because they don't know. Maybe we're going to blow up their fucking house. Maybe we're going to be in their house when they try and
Mhm.
come back, still fighting.
Right.
It's just weird to think about.
Yeah. It reminds me of. Thankfully, I wasn't. We were on a patrol, and so I wasn't at the base to witness this. But I was a little kid. He was just playing with his brother and hit an IED, and so his brother pushed him in a wheelbarrow up to our patrol base, and our corpsman that was there tried to save him but couldn't, and it's just like my thinking at that point was, well, man, if we weren't here fighting on their turf, would that IED be there? Would that kid still be alive? And those are kind of things that I had to like try and rationalize myself. Like, they don't want us here because we are here. There's IEDs that kids are stepping on, farmers are stepping on. Innocent women and children are getting blown up because of our presence. But yeah, it's definitely hard to rationalize.
I'm sorry that you had to witness that. That is some of the hardest stuff. From a distance, and I'm talking, it was probably like 100 meters. Before we had entered into a village, we were doing a big old operation, and one of the 500-pound bombs got dropped before we entered. And from a distance, another unit that was attached to us was carrying like a dead kid out. And I wasn't a
Mm,
part of it, but I remember etched into my brain, like from like, it was like 100, 150 meters away, just watching this like lifeless kid. And at the
mm,
moment, I was like, man, I rationalized it. I'm like, that is the cost of war.
yeah.
I think back on it, I'm like, why? Like that kid was just a kid. They were born into
Hmm.
this situation. And now, because we're there, and I'm not saying the Taliban are good people and treated them well,
Right.
but it's hard not to think how many people would be alive if we weren't there. Um,
Hmm.
and it's very, like I said, I have to do mental gymnastics to disassociate because if I don't, I just get incredibly depressed thinking about it. So moving forward from that, you get some pop shots. You're trying to help out. You're trying to make a good impact. You mind getting into when you hit an IED?
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, we were just doing a normal patrol like any other day, and let's see, we've been already patrolling for a few hours, and we decided we would go up to this. It was I guess you could call it a hill. It was kind of like a mound, just on this other side of this abandoned poppy field. And on the other side of this hill, it was a steeper drop and went down further, but there's a small, really small village, few huts there, and then there's a roadway, more like a trail, I guess, that the Taliban, they would use it to, get drugs and money and weapons in and out of there. And we decided, we've been patrolling for a while. Let's go take a break, and we can also at the same time do some overwatch in this, roadway and little village. And so we get up to the top, and it's like an old Russian outpost. And you can see like a couple of sandbags here and there. And so we get up, and in a 360, we've got a minesweeper in front. He's sweeping the area, and we all get down on the prone behind our rifles. I'm a saw gunner, so I've got to have a pretty good avenue of fire to lay suppression down if need be. And so I lay down in one spot, and thinking it's pretty decent. Then I get told I need to pick up and move to a better location, and so I stand back up. I walk over to the new spot. I got my buddy Mike to the right, and I lay down. Put my rifle down first. I'm wiggling myself to get behind my rifle in a comfortable position. And I don't know if it was like my foot or ankle when I laid it down, it hit a pressure plate. And I remember just waking up on my back, and I don't know if you've ever had that kind of dream where you want to move but you just can't, like your body's locked in and you can't do anything, and you have this strong desire to move but I just couldn't. And I just see like dust and everything, it's all foggy, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, man, I could have sworn we were on a patrol. I don't know how I could have fallen asleep that fast, just getting behind my rifle. And that's when I realized, I see my buddy Mike running over and my corpsman and everything coming over to put tourniquets on. And that's when I realized, like, oh man, this isn't a dream. I hit an IED. And then I was able to kind of push myself up enough to assess the damage. And I see my left leg, it was gone below the knee. My right leg was just shredded. I didn't even notice my right arm had taken a lot of damage too. But yeah, just kind of this numb feeling all over. And my buddies start putting their tourniquets on, and they get a stretcher out, put me on it, and they start carrying me down the hillside to this abandoned poppy field to wait for the helos. And so we get down, they're walking me down. My buddy Mike's up my head. He's, saying the Lord's Prayer with me, is just to, try to keep me awake. They didn't want me to fall asleep. And so they're carrying me down, and they get to the bottom, and they start putting, more bandages. The corpsman's, doing whatever he can, packing my wounds. And I had no idea about some of them. And putting, tightening up tourniquets and morphine and that kind of thing. And my buddies are, these are guys I served with for quite a while. Some of them are my Marines that I helped train and a team leader for, and great friendships with them too. We've been through quite a bit already, and so they were having a hard time, emotionally with it. And I just told them, like, hey, look, this is God's plan. Whatever ends up happening, I know God's got a plan for it. So, you guys just focus on what you have to do. Don't worry about me. And then they had the helos come in and loaded me up and took me to the field hospital in Bagram.
After the blast and you're sitting up and you're assessing yourself, you said you were numb. You didn't feel any pain at all. Were you, what was going through your mind when you looked down and you saw your legs?
I just remember like looking, and then I just laid back and was like, yep, they're gone. I was like, yeah, I think I pretty quickly just accepted what had happened, already.
That Marine Corps mentality of, all right, well, this is just kind of it.
Yep.
So you lay back. You've accepted. You look down. You've accepted it. So it sounds like your brain was still functioning very rationally. It was very like, okay, this is what happened, essentially. And it sounds like you were able to kind of figure out pretty quickly, like, all right, this is the situation I'm in now. Did you guys, was that like an initiation to an ambush at all, or was it just an IED and that was it? Like you got hit and there was no response or nobody around to capitalize.
Yeah, this guy put it up there. He, I think, planned on just taking out as many as possible. There are two other IEDs in the area, two secondaries that we didn't find either. But EOD, when they got up there, they found two others in the same area. But thankfully, nobody hit him. But I think he was just trying to kill as many as he could. But yeah.
Okay, so you lay back. You accepted what's going on with your legs. There's no ambush. Nobody's capitalizing. Thankfully, your corpsman comes over and your buddy comes over. Are you talking with them at all? Are they talking with you, or are they just immediately going into care, getting those turned?
They're immediately just going into care, trying to keep me awake. Like, hey man, you're gonna be all right. Everything's gonna be, all the stuff that you kind of learn
Yeah.
in training. But
What was
yeah, I
going?
can't really remember.
Oh, you can't remember. I mean, I don't. I'm not surprised. It just sounded like you were very conscious and aware during all that. Okay. You get on the bird. You told everybody. You told your buddies, like, hey, this is just part of the plan. At that point, what? Even then, you're not. It doesn't sound like you were thinking of yourself. It sounds like you were still thinking of the people around you. You're still trying to help the people around you with, you know, dealing with something that you're dealing with. Did you stay conscious on the bird?
They put me out once I got on the bird. So
Okay.
yeah,
Where did you wake up?
I remember little flashes of there's like little bits of memory that I can remember from when we landed at Bagram. They're pulling me out of the bird and they bring me into the field hospital and just kind of in and out of consciousness at that point. And I remember, the last snippet I remember at that point anyway was the doctor coming over and he's telling me, "Hey, you're going to be all right. We're going to take care of you." And then they put me under an induced coma at that point, and I think I was out for like a month or so.
And during those snippets at any point, it almost sounds like from an outside perspective that you didn't fully grasp what had, like, it sounds like rationally your mind understood, like, hidden ID, legs are gone, need to take, this is the plan, need to make sure that my guys understand that I understand I'm okay. But it almost sounds like were you panicked at all?
Not that I can remember. I was kind of just so fast, the
Mm.
putting me in a coma and everything was just so sudden. And those, little snippets too. It's kind of like, you see in the movies where people like, going in and out of consciousness and they're just seeing like little flashes of picture playing but really not enough time to like actually think through it. It's just this fog in your memory.
Hmm. Okay. So you wake up a month later. What happens then?
I don't really remember the initial part. I guess more so from what my family tells me. But yeah, they wake me up in Walter Reed. Um, and my family's there, my dad, my mom, my wife, uh, probably my brother and my sister, I think. And at first they the doctors had no idea that I knew what happened. They just assumed that I got hit and was unconscious the whole time and had no idea what happened. And so my dad he was at my bedside, and he's telling me like, "Hey, son, I want to let you know, like you've lost your legs." And I just told him, I was like, "I know, Dad." So
Mm.
they had no idea, but yeah, they're just trying to figure out a way to like, how do I tell my child that he's lost his limbs? And yeah, that's kind of just, I don't remember that personally, but that's what my family has told me kind of happened the first moments there.
Well, that initial acceptance is. I've talked to a couple folks now who have been kind of similar experiences, and that initial consciousness and of acceptance, like in that moment, is that's outstanding to me. Like that is when you hear about something like that, my gut reaction is like you were in shock, but like I don't fucking know, and I'm not gonna pretend like I know. And I don't even know if that's true because talking to you, it sounds like you were just like like you were just really aware, like kind of like when you're in a firefight, your adrenaline's going, but you're surprisingly calm. You're just like
Mhm.
like in your head, like you're calm and you're aware. It seems like you were just very fuck laid down on an IED and my legs are gone now. All right, and then
Yeah.
you woke up in a hospital. Wow,
Yeah. Just another day, and
it's just another
figure
day
out
of
how
being a
life is going to
Marine.
be, adapt, overcome, that kind of thing. But
So you wake up at Walter Reed, your whole family is there. If at any point during this, while you were, before you get to Walter Reed, at any point during that, did you think, like, did the thought of dying ever cross your mind?
I mean, I was in a coma at that point. And I guess before I even got on the bird to go to the field hospital, the thought did cross my mind. I was like, I could die. I could bleed out right now and die. Um,
Hmm.
but I didn't really dwell on it. Um, and then in Germany, they thought I was going to die, and so they actually called my wife and my family, and they said, "Hey, you've got to get up here and say your last goodbyes because he's not going to make it." And so they flew my whole family out to Germany, and they're gonna planning to say goodbye. And I don't know, God had a plan for me still, and ended up turning a corner once they got there. I don't know if it was just hearing their voices subconsciously or what, but yeah, I turned a corner and I was able to fly out to Walter Reed.
Hmm. I'm trying to gather my thoughts. It's while you were in a coma. Do you remember anything at all? Were you able to hear anything, or did you just? It was just like waking up from like being asleep.
They're little snippets here and there. Um, I remember like, I don't remember if it was like on the flight or what, but there are parts in my memory where it feels like I'm upside down, and I'll close my eyes again and go back to sleep, and then I wake up and I'm right side up. And then it'd like just keep doing that, and it just freaked me out. And wanting to like just stay right side up, but my mind just kept going back and forth. And yeah, that's just kind of the only thing I can really remember.
So you weren't like dreaming or anything. You were just you had those moments where it was just right side up, upside down, right side up, upside down.
Yeah, the only dream I can remember, I'm like in this glass, clear glass tube, like I'm just floating in it. And my dad's on the outside of this tube, and this blue light just starts going upwards, starting from my legs. And as it's going upwards, it's like healing my bones, putting all the bones back into place, and then healing my body. But it's excruciating. And so I'm screaming in this tube. My dad's just on the outside yelling at me like, "It's going to be okay, son. You're going to be all right." And that's just kind of the only dream that I ever can remember.
Well, thank you for sharing that story for starters. Um, okay, so you wake up, you're with your family, you're in Walter Reed. You know your legs are gone. Um, what's kind of the next step? Like, what happened to getting you home, to getting you released? Walk me through that.
Let's see. I had to spend about 3 months or so in Walter Reed, just doing all the surgeries. Had a lot of infection. Getting all that Afghani dirt thrown in your body apparently isn't a good thing, and so I just kept having infections, and they kept having to amputate me further and further, and so went from below the knee on both legs to above the knee, and then had extensive damage to my right arm, and lost my tailbone and things like that, and so had to like go through all these surgeries in about a 3 month span, and then finally I get the opportunity to be able to go either stay in Walter Reed or have the choice to go to San Diego at Balboa. And I chose San Diego for sure for obvious reasons, way better weather. Then I'm closer to my unit as well. I mean, they're getting ready to arrive back from their deployment. And because, I got injured only 3.5 months in. And so here they are getting ready to return. And I definitely wanted to be there for them. It's closer to family, all that. So go to San Diego. And from there, it's, a few more surgeries, more minor um, wound clean outs mainly, that kind of thing. And then getting fitted for prosthetics, uh, learning how to walk in prosthetics, different rehab and physical therapy and all that good stuff. And so I ended up being there for about 2 years, just going through all the rehab portion of it, and then waiting for medical retirement to go through. So it's just a long process of bunch of paperwork, but yeah, just about 2 years or so we stayed in San Diego. But yeah, I mean I think that was just the longer part, just all the surgeries and rehab, getting to where I was mobile and able to kind of do life on my own, or at least close to it.
And mentally, how are you mentally during all this? It sounds like you are an incredibly resilient and an incredibly rational individual going through this experience. How was kind of you mentioned you accepted in that moment, like right as it happened, that your legs were pretty much gone. How is your mental health going through the rehab, learning to walk with prosthetics, and then wanting to be there with your unit when they came home?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely like to try and at least portray a sense of just calmness and whatnot, but I think everybody has a breaking point, and initially going through surgeries and whatnot, I'm sure I had a few moments where just had breaking points and uh, and things like that. But for the most part, I remained relatively calm, whether it was just the drugs they had pumping into me or if it was just actually just me. But I stayed relatively positive and calm and whatnot, and just kind of did what I had to do. And then it really wasn't until I got to San Diego, starting my rehab and getting to actually do things again, realizing the difficulty of everything, what my life was now going to be like more so on a day to day basis, where the depression, the anger, resentment started to set in. And yeah, I went from being fairly calm to pretty angry. Um, I guess all the time, really. And yeah, I took it out on my wife mainly. She's the constant person there, with me, and unfortunately, the person that I took out my anger on the most. A lot of yelling, slamming doors, things like that. And, but yeah, that's just kind of how my mentality at least played out. And it wasn't till, a couple years later that I got to a point of like full acceptance, I guess, and like a change of heart.
Who or what were you angry at?
A lot of it, I don't even know. I I guess I could just thrive on that anger. I, it was a easy emotion to have. And I think it was more comfortable for me than to admit that I was hurting. It was easier than being sad and depressed. And it was just, yeah, I was always there. And, a lot of it, yeah, I was just angry that, I'm trying to do things and I just can't do it. I'm trying to walk and I'm falling. I, hit a little rock on the sidewalk or something, and I'm, falling down on the ground, and, those sorts of things that just kind of like add up, and just that anger of like, seriously, like this is ridiculous. And, um, but yeah, I think more so it's just that it was just an easy emotion to have.
Well, it's understandable too. I mean, your life changed forever in an instant. 1 second you're patrolling along, laying down, going to get behind your gun, and in the next couple moments, it seems like you're just waking up in a hospital. And I, I, I think it's more than reasonable for you to have been angry, um, and I'm happy you were able to overcome it. What helped you the most with overcoming kind of that anger and moving towards where you are now?
Um, the only thing that I can, I guess, really contribute it to would be, nothing short of a miracle. Honestly, I mean, I remember I was just having a moment where I'm just extremely angry. I can't remember why, uh, but yeah, just being extremely angry, and I go into the bathroom and I look at myself in the mirror. I remember just hating who I saw looking back. I hated the person that I had become. I hated seeing how angry I was and the people that I took it out on. And I remember thinking, I don't want to, I don't want my daughter, because we had my oldest daughter at that point. I don't want my daughter and future children to grow up telling their friends and stuff like, yeah, my dad was an angry person. That's who my dad was. Or my wife to just, stay married to me just, out of, um, kind of obligation and whatnot, and just have an angry husband, having to tell her family and friends, like, yeah, he's just angry all the time. I didn't want that. And, I remember just calling out to God, and I was like, Lord, you've got to change me. Like, I can't do it on my own. And I just broke down sobbing and just crying out to God, asking him to change me. And, it honestly was like, a switch. That feeling of rage that I just always felt inside just went away. And, before then, like, I didn't have feelings of empathy and love, and, things would happen. My wife, things would happen with my wife or whatever. And I'd just be like, okay, whatever. I don't care. Like, I just didn't have that in me to care. And, but instead at this moment, like, empathy came and filled me. I had love and care. And, it frustrated my wife at that time because, she knew me for like a few years of just this angry person. And then, like, instantly, I was just totally different, talking to her differently and wanting to show love and care. And she was like, no, that's not how it works. Like, you can't just take it back, And, um, but that's kind of how it was for me. And I know it's definitely not like that for everyone, but that's the only thing I can contribute it to, honestly, is just a miracle. Like, I can't explain it.
Well, when you think of, the type of person that joins the military and joins combat arms and sees combat and goes through what you had to go through, I imagine in your head, and I mean, not just in your head, just kind of in general, when people have little problems, and I don't want to say little problems because that's disingenuous. Like any problem can be a big problem for anybody. But when you see somebody go through something, I would imagine it is hard to be empathetic on a much smaller scale on my end. Like I kind of understand where, when I think of hardships in my head, I think I'm justified. I was able to overcome this. So, like, you having to deal with this problem that I deem small, like, you need to get the fuck over it. And I think what that inevitably does, it turns into playing the suffering Olympics. And
Mm.
it's not healthy. Um,
No. Yeah.
it's not a healthy thing to do. And I'm very happy and very glad that you were able to overcome that through um, you call it a miracle. I'm saying from having now gotten to chat with you, not just today, but through the course of our failed attempts at recording and hearing about you from the initial person who reached out and actually showed me who you were, and hearing about you and looking things about you, I I don't necessarily think it was a miracle outside of your control. I think it sounds like it was you. It sounds like you had to, kind of like in the military physically, where you discover new limits and how much you can push your body and overcome. From the outside looking in, it sounds like you got pushed mentally beyond what you thought you were capable of, and you adapted and you overcame and you made changes and you inevitably became, uh, you know, the person you are now.
Mm.
And I think, that it's very commendable. There's a lot of lessons to learn there. Um, and I'm just incredibly happy that you were able to experience this tragedy, um, and essentially overcome it. And now you're a dad. You have three beautiful kids. You're
Mm. Yeah.
a husband, and um, you're doing good things for other people too. You're
Mm.
expanding this type of care
Definitely. Yeah.
and trying to help others, which is, I mean, you never stop giving. And I think that's a mindset a lot of veterans have, where they're not in the military but they want to continue serving. And I think that is the best type of service you can give, because it's not you're actively choosing to do it, and you actively chose to go into the Marine Corps, but now you are actively trying to help other people. um, and I think through your experiences and your resilience, I mean, you have helped people. Getting into that, what kind of made you get into what you're doing now? Well, what got you into the foundation?
Let's see. I think the initial part of that would be, after medically retiring and moving up to Oregon, and I was with a friend of mine, and we were going to start a business together, and doing like firearms training and developing some different products for shooters, and um, we were out in New Hampshire at one point, or actually, I'll backtrack on that. We were out at in Vegas at SHOT Show and going through the convention there, and there's a Marine who had gone through the same Wounded Warrior Battalion. He was in San Diego the same time I was, and double amputee as well. Wasn't in prosthetics. I think his legs were amputated too high to be able to feasibly be in prosthetics, and so he's just rolling around in a wheelchair. And I saw him, and we started chatting, and he was telling me that he's working with this company that makes wheelchairs for amputees or people that are paralyzed to be able to play golf. And I was like, that's pretty cool, And he's there trying to just help them advertise their product, and then he's telling me he's got plans to go and do the I think Paralympics in or the Warrior Games or something like that in with the air shooting competitions, and so he was already like a pretty good shot already, and he'd been doing that for a while, and so he had plans to go there. And I mean, he's just a very positive guy. I mean, smiles and just a lot of positivity. Fast forward probably 2-3 months, and I'm out in New Hampshire doing some training with Sig Sauer, and I scroll through Facebook and I see this kid had killed himself, and I was just like in that moment, like, are you serious? Like, why? Like, I literally saw you just a few months ago, and you were all smiles, positive. You had things going for you. You had plans for your life. You were going places, and he's not the first one I'd seen. I had people that I served with commit suicide, and he was just kind of, I guess, the last straw for me on that. And I was like, I've got to do something. And so I called up my friend Ryan Sawtell. He's the founder of White Heart Foundation, and I'd met him through they donated a action track chair. It's like a wheelchair on with tank treads on it, and they donated that to me like a few years prior. And so I knew Ryan, and I reached out to him and I said, hey, how do I start a nonprofit? Like, I am sick and tired of seeing people kill themselves. There has to be something that I can do to help mitigate this. And he said, dude, you don't want to start a nonprofit. It's a nightmare. And we've been wanting to develop a program for this very reason, but we need somebody to run it. And so I said right there, I'm the guy. And so I told my buddy, I was like, hey, man, I'm not going to do this business. I'm going to do this program instead. Like, this is where my heart's at. And from there, back in, it was 2015, Ryan Stottel and I, we just sat down and we started developing a program for veterans, did a lot of research on, what helps people that have gone through mental trauma, what things actually help people. It's not the pills, it's not the counselors and therapists. It's being out in nature. Then we thought about, okay, what do veterans enjoy? Where we enjoy that adrenaline rush. We enjoy camaraderie, and you lose that once you get out. And so we put some activities in there that are, you get that adrenaline rush, you do some whitewater rafting and rock climbing, things like that, things that make you push yourself past limits that you didn't realize you had. You push past fears, but you've got a team of people that are around you who are veterans who understand you, and they can push you to get to the top or get through the river. And so, yeah, we spent a year developing this program, and in 2016, we launched our first Guardian Project trip.
With your organ, so you reach out to your buddy. He had donated that wheelchair. Kind of sounds fucking cool. You said that's tank tracks on it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Just for getting all types of places.
Oh yeah. You can use it for hunting. It goes anywhere.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So you started, well, you didn't start. Now you run that organization, correct?
Correct.
That's a beautiful thing. It's a very non-traditional approach, which I think it's needed. Because, like you said, there are a lot of veterans who have faced a lot of trauma, and I don't know your feelings about it. I'll give my personal experience and feelings about it, and then I'm curious for yours. The behavioral health system in the Army, at least in the Army, it sucks. It is very bad. It's a broken system. I have my own personal experiences with it, where not to get too deep into it, but basically, I had been paying to see counseling off post for years because I didn't want the Army to find out. Um,
Yeah.
Out of pocket, I would drive like an hour and a half to 2 hours away from base to make sure there was no connection with the military.
Mm.
And I did that for years, paying out of pocket, paying with cash. I was paranoid. I didn't want the military to find out because I had seen HIPAA violations with my own soldiers where my soldiers were seeking help for some of the things that they've experienced. And the commanders would call me in and be like, hey, why is Private so and so or Specialist so and so or Sergeant so and so going to behavior health? Well, I'm not telling you. Like, I'm not going to disclose any of that information.
Yeah.
Even though maybe they, confide in me, or maybe they share some things with me and more things with their counselor. I don't know, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to violate that trust. And I remember a moment where the commander was like, "Oh, you're not going to tell me?" And I'm like, "No, no, sir, I'm not." And he's like, "Okay." And I'm in his office. He picks up the phone, calls behavioral health, and he's like, "Hey, is Captain so and so X, Y, and Z's counselor over there?" They're like, "Yep." And they're like, "Can I talk to him?" Puts it on speaker and is asking him, "What is so and so telling you about in counseling?"
Wow.
And I remember sitting there and I'm like, I'm sh- I'm shaking. I'm so angry about it still to this day. This was years ago. I remember sitting, I'm like, this is the exact opposite of what is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Um, that soldier ended up getting, he ended up getting retired because he went into shock on deployment. It was a whole thing. But I remember that was my soldier. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, that was my friend. Um,
Yeah.
and to see that type of trust violated, as I was a very young leader at that time, I had just gotten promoted. I remember, like, this is just not how it's supposed to be. So
Hmm.
that led to me being like, okay, I'm going to go do this for myself because I was having my own problems. And then fast forward, I had PCS, and counseling was way more expensive to continue my treatment. So I remember I called TRICARE. I'm like, hey, can you guys cover this? If they're with the network, they told me, yep, they'll cover it. I'm like, I don't have to go to unit for anything. They're like, nope, they won't even know. And then after doing that and they paying for like 8 to 10 sessions or something, I get a call from the embedded behavioral health on post. And they're like, hey, you have to come here. And I'm like,
Hmm.
come here for what? And I show up and they're like, have you been seeing counseling off post? And I'm like, yeah, but TRICARE's paying for it. They're like, we're denying it now. You have to be seen here.
Oh, wow.
And then, well, long story short, what I'm getting at is they lied to me and they're like, I'm like, no, I'm not going to see you. I'll just go pay for it out of pocket again. And they lied to me and they were like, if you pay for your own counseling out of pocket, you can get in trouble and you can face UCMJ. And
Hmm.
I'm in my head, I'm an NCO. I know that isn't true. I went to JAG. And they're like, yeah, no, that's not how that works. But I remember
Huh.
what bothers me, I thought back to my soldier who had that HIPAA violation. And I thought about that moment and I'm like, how many soldiers go through something like this and they're trying to do the right thing. They're being seen, they're getting help, and they're trying to do the right thing. And then they're lied to and told they can face UCMJ and they don't know better to where they can't get in trouble. And they
Right.
go and it really upsets me. And
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of broken things in behavioral health, but that's why I want to talk to. I mean, that amongst other things is one of the many reasons why I talk to you, because I look now. One, I'm able to talk about it because I'm not in uniform anymore. When you're in uniform, you can't really start. You know, it's not good for your
Yeah.
career.
All right.
Um, but two, the unconventional approach or the non-traditional approach of just seeking counseling, because I'd be lying if I said counseling alone is what has helped me overcome. There's been a lot of things, a lot of changes I've had to make in my life to overcome these issues. But I love seeing organizations and people like yourself who are going about things in a very different way, because I think the impact is larger. I'm not going to say counseling is completely useless. I will say, in my experience, counseling from the military is useless, and
Mm,
it
yeah.
makes problems worse in my experience. I'm sure there are some good counselors, and I'm sure there are some good programs. I just haven't seen them, so I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt because I've only seen bad. Um, Outside, like civilian counselors have been tremendously helpful. Seeking
Hmm.
care away from that has been tremendously helpful. But organizations like yourself and what you're doing, I think, is where you really start to see positive change. Um, Not only are you doing something different, you're approaching it from a different way. You're like, what? 'Cause what infantryman likes to go and sit down and talk about their problems?
Yeah.
Not a
Yeah.
lot.
Exactly. Hmm.
Um, so you're like, we're gonna get out in nature and we're gonna do shit. We're gonna make you work. Because as
Hmm.
much as we like to think that we like to be lazy and not do anything innately, I think a lot of people that join, especially combat arms, like to go out and do shit.
Oh yeah.
So you getting out there and doing that, I think is great, and it's one of, like I said, I have a lot of reasons why I wanted to talk to you, but I wanted to share that story with you to really drive that home. I really appreciate what you're doing. Um, so when you're out on these trips and you're out doing these things, is it is it just that trip, or are you applying anything else, or are you talking about things, or is it just no, we're going to go on a trip and I'm making not making you, but like we're going to go do
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. So going through, Wounded Warrior Battalion, I've had an opportunity to go on multiple different trips with different organizations, and I'm not going to go and like say that they were bad necessarily. I mean, everybody had good intentions, and they just wanted to like give opportunities to wounded veterans and be able to give them, hunting and fishing and those sorts of trips, which are fun. But the thing that I noticed was there's never any sort of focus on mental health at all. It was just let's give them a fun trip, give them a bunch of swag, and send them on their way. And then that was it. You were never reached out to unless it was about another trip that's coming up. Um, and so I saw that and I was like, that is not helpful in any way mentally. You're getting some fun out of it, and then you go back home and you're right back to where you were again. Um, and we need community. We need a group of people. We need family that we had like in the military, but that we can call on at any time. People that we can trust. And so what we do is, yes, we go and have a fun time. We do the rafting and the rock climbing, the horseback riding and whatnot. But every night we sit around a fire and we will do certain classes, things we cover things like anxiety, depression, anger. I give the story that I gave you all, with my anger, the story that I had with anger, and share those accounts, and then give them certain questions to kind of ponder and think over and write down, and give them an opportunity to share their story if they're willing. It's never pushed on anybody, but it's encouraged to talk and share and to ask questions of one another, because like I shared with you, I think over probably text, was we all have a story, and you never know who your story can impact unless you share it. And so your story, my story, everyone's story has somebody that you can impact. And unless you're willing to open up and share it, which I get is hard, it takes time to be willing to share it. But in a group where it's of other people that have gone through similar circumstances, people that are all veterans, and it's we keep it pretty small. Those sorts of environments, you can feel a lot more comfortable sharing, and it's an opportunity for them to maybe share for the very first time. And we've had people 10 years of just bottling their trauma, and this has been like their first outlet where they feel that they can share. And so that's probably the biggest part of these trips. It's not the fun stuff we do, it's the conversation. And whether it's in a group setting or it's maybe one-on-one during the day while you're rafting or kayaking, you got a buddy behind you, and you're having those one-on-one conversations and the beauty of nature, and you're willing to just open up and just vomit all that you've been holding for so many years. That's where it all comes together.
It sounds almost like you're creating not necessarily that hardship, because it doesn't sound like anything you're doing is like hard, but you're creating that environment where you have to put forth effort, and those things, like I said in the beginning, they create bonds with people.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things that I tried to do, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't selfish as well. When we got back, my unit, and we started to roll into like team live fires, squad live fires, platoon live fires, all those training events. Whenever we were like pulling security at like a patrol base, I would go around, and obviously, you're checking on your guys. You're doing the right thing that like a team leader, squad leader should do. You're checking on your guys, making sure they're awake, making sure they're pulling security. I would go around, and while I would do that stuff, I would try and sit there and like, it probably wasn't the right thing to do during training. Um, but I would sit there and I'm like, how are you doing? And like, we would talk.
Hmm.
How's being
Yeah.
home? How's reintegrating with life? Because that's one thing. I was talking with Fred from Counting Coup Tactical. He works at Spiritus as well. He was Air Force Special Operations for 20 years and retired. And I was
Yeah.
talking with him
Yeah.
about the reintegration process from people from deployment. We don't have one. We don't have a good one, at least, where
Mm.
you just come home, and he would come home after running operations and shooting people and calling in all of these things and being in this intense environment to like 48 hours later, like he's a dad again, like at home.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Like
Yep.
that's not that's not the right answer.
No.
It's not, you can't. And I described it to previous counselors that I've had, like, you have to, it's like a light switch, at least for me, it's like a light switch with your emotions where you have to like detach. And so you turn that light switch off, because while you're deployed and while you're in combat and while you're doing these things, you can't really be thinking, you can't be distracted. And then you come home and you have to turn it on. But every time you do that, it gets harder to turn that light switch back on.
Definitely. Yep.
So the reintegration process is hard, and I remember I would try and do that for my soldiers, like during training, just because at the moment it was also a way for me to talk about things with people that I trusted, but at the same time it was an environment where we're all sucking, we're all doing something like it's like 1 a.m. and we're pulling security in the rain or snow in Fort Drum, like this isn't an enjoyable thing. So
Yeah.
it's a time to kind of distract yourself and talk openly. And it sounds similar. I mean, you're not out pulling security at 2 a.m., but you're getting people out there. You're doing something that's a little hard, that's getting people to think or getting them to physically exert something. And then you're bonding over that during the day. And then at night, it kind of opens people up a little bit, I think.
Yeah. It does. Mm.
And I think that's brilliant, what you're doing.
I appreciate it.
How long have you said you've been doing that since 2015?
2016 was our
2016.
first trip. Yeah.
So 6 years now. Wow. How many
Yeah.
trips do you think you've done?
Uh, man, I'd have to think about it, but yeah, it's probably been. I mean, for a while there was just one trip a year, but yeah, it's probably been you know 10, 12, something like that, maybe more, 10 to 15. Yeah,
That's outstanding. And
yeah,
you're creating more bonds and relationship with people.
absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
and the big thing too is it's not just the trip we take people on, but it's you're put into our system, and we keep um, contact with you. We reach out, make sure you're okay. We invite everybody to come to on other trips again if they need it, or come to a reunion that we do in September, um, and give them opportunities to volunteer and just be kind of a active member in society. Because a lot of people just kind of get in their house and they stay there and they don't get out. So
it sounds like you're almost building like a volunteer squad or battalion if you want to give some military structure to it. It's like,
yeah, I guess so.
hey,
Yeah,
come out here, do something. And I think, I mean, it does a lot of things, but it also creates a sense of that brotherhood and that belonging, which a lot of people have taken away from them when they leave the
yeah.
military. That's outstanding. I love to hear it. I really do. Um, well, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I know it seems like you've shared this story many times talking with the people, like you said, at the campfire, but I don't imagine it always being the easiest thing to do. So I greatly appreciate you taking the time and chatting with me. Um, it's
Oh
been
yeah.
awesome.
No, it's my pleasure. And yeah, kind of on that, thing about I talked about was, people, everyone's story. If I can help at least one person that's listening in some capacity to kind of see a resemblance in their story, maybe of like, oh wow, I'm not the only one that's gone through this. Then it's all worth it. And so I really appreciate you having me on this show.
Do you have any trips coming up?
We're finished for this year. I mean, we do have one last trip at the end of the month here in about a week. It's going to be a ladies only trip. So another thing that we do is, uh, unlike most organizations, most of them need like not post 9/11, but like combat wounded or Purple Heart recipient. We do just anyone that's post 9/11 and honorably discharged, and so we get a lot of women that have dealt with military sexual trauma. And so we've got a trip here in about a week for just a group of ladies. They're going out to Colorado for 5 days. And yeah, it's just going to be ladies only. So pretty cool opportunity. But yeah, we'll have some trips next year.
That's outstanding. And where can folks find these trips? Sign up for walk me through that process. Shill yourself. Well, you're not
Yeah.
shilling. You're talking. You're trying to help people. So how can folks come get help with you and do something with you, or maybe even volunteer if they want to help?
Sure. So the best way would be to go on our website. It's Whiteheart. It's one word, whiteheart.org/Guardian Project. And there you can learn more about what we do. There's a tab for filling out an application. So you go ahead, and if you meet the requirements of post 9/11, honorably discharged, go ahead and out the application, and then I'll be in touch. So I personally call everybody that applies, kind of get to know you a little bit over the phone, and then once we get dates set up, you'll get an email with the available trips on that year, and then we'll kind of put people, where they best fit.
That's amazing that you call everybody too. It's a very personable thing. Everybody go check them out. If you want to help out, please go. Please go help out. If you want to go on one of those trips, please contact them. Go on one of those trips. I think it's a great program, and I think it's non traditional. And if you're a vet that's sitting at home not doing anything, just go hang out, meet new
Yeah.
people, do something.
Yep.
Um, no, I appreciate you coming on. If you want, you can close out
Thank
with
you.
some advice, but I feel like the whole podcast there's a lot of advice packed into there, so I'll leave it up to you. If you got any closing closing advice to folks, or dad advice, is a big one.
Yeah. Well, I think, what you had just mentioned was, if you're just sitting at home, go check it out. The hardest part for people on these trips is making that first step to go. It's easy to sit in your house and just stay there and not do anything. But, if you're a veteran, you've been taught through your whole military career to not just sit there. You've got to get off that X. You got to move. You can't just stay where you are. You're a target for all kinds of bad things, depression, and worse. So, my encouragement to everybody is just take that step, and I guarantee you, your life's going to change for the better. It definitely won't get worse going on these trips. So, just take that first step. And as far as dad advice, man, I don't know. Just take time with your kids. It goes so fast. I mean, I've got a 8-year-old already. It's hard to believe, but just take time with those kids, and because this world's changing fast, and they need to be prepared. And so just love your kids and raise them right.
I love that. Get off your ass. There's still work to do. You're the project now, though. You're the ones that you have to help yourself. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
No, thank you so much.